I'm Candice Michel, and this is Our Community. Well, it's another beautiful, crisp autumn day in Brookings. We've had enough rain in the past few weeks to end our fire season here, thank goodness. And last night, it got distinctly cold. In fact, the last 2 nights, it's gotten distinctly cold. The weather reports I've seen said it got down somewhere between 37 and 34 degrees. And that's pretty cold for this time of year. My thoughts always go to our unsheltered and marginally sheltered neighbors when the weather starts getting cold and wet. Folks, a lot of them longtime residents here, who find themselves sometimes literally between a rock and a hard place, with not much help in sight. One of the places they know they can get some help is at St. Timothy's Episcopal Church, that little red church on the corner of First Street and Old County Road, directly across the street from Azalea Park. Interestingly, the Brookings City Council appears to be trying to limit the services provided there. And Brookings and St. Tim's and the Episcopal Diocese of Oregon are currently engaged in a lawsuit that will determine how much say a city government can have in the practice of religion. My guests today are Father Bernie from St. Tim's and Robert O'Sullivan, an historian, teacher, research, and former minister who relocated to Brookings about 6 years ago. Welcome to Brookings, gentlemen.
Thank you for having us, Candice.
Yes,
welcome to Brookings. No, welcome to the show, right? You've been here in Brookings.
I've only been here 7 years, and I need to be welcomed. I'm learning that.
Well, you know that if you weren't born here, you are considered to be a newcomer.
And a Californicator.
Or that. I mean, I've been here for nearly 20 years, and I'm still basically considered, newcomer, right? Yeah. So, Bernie, let's start with you. I'm sure that most of our listeners know you've been here forever. You were born and raised here, right?
Yeah. Well, I was born at the Seaside Hospital down in Crescent City before the new hospital was built. And the new hospital was built 33 years ago or something, 32 years ago.
The one in Crescent City?
Yeah, 1992. Okay. That's the new hospital.
Wow.
Yeah, the Sutter Coast Hospital is the new hospital. So when you talk about, see, that's how I know you're a newcomer. You don't think of that as the new hospital.
No. That's pretty funny. So you went to Brookings High, didn't you?
Brookings Harbor High, yeah.
Oh, Brookings Harbor High, right. And I do believe that one of your good friends was Tony Barron.
Yeah, Tony and I, he's a couple years younger than me in high school. So when I really got to know him, it was after I had graduated. And we spent a lot of time together. We had a lot of fun together.
You hung out and got in trouble and set hillsides on fire.
We did. We did. And I've always considered him a very good friend, and it hurts my heart that right now we're not able to have conversations because of this pending litigation.
Yep, that would definitely be painful.
Yeah, but it'll be over soon enough, and when it does, hopefully we can reestablish our friendship.
Right. So you went on to become a commercial fisherman, and then you decided to become...
Well, it wasn't, it's not really that I decided. It's a little bit more complicated than I just woke up one day and thought I'd become a priest in the Episcopal Church.
It usually is.
Yeah. But, my wife and I, she's a year older than I am, and she graduated from Brookings Harbor High School in 1984. And we had already been a couple for quite a little while by then because we started to date when we were at Azalea Middle School.
Wow.
Yeah. It's pretty fun, huh?
Okay.
Yeah.
Middle school.
I remember the day. It was March 13th, 1980. I remember where I was standing. It was outside of the gymnasium, which was brand new at the time, by the way.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And, I asked her if she wanted to go steady, and she said yes, and here we are.
Oh. Only a few years later.
Yeah, so since she graduated the year before I did, she graduated in 1984 from Brookings Harbor High. She went to the community college down in Crescent City, College of the Redwoods, for a year, and then was a transfer student to the university that we ended up going to in Salem.
Excellent. And then you somehow got ordained as a minister.
Well, you're jumping ahead a little bit.
Or priest. And just help me with these terms because I always trip over myself. So you're a priest.
I am an Episcopal priest, yes.
Okay. So does that mean you are or are not a minister?
Well, priests are ministers. They're pastors, reverend.
Okay. So is minister kind of a definition of what you do?
Well, yeah. I mean, I would hope that all Christians have ministries and, they minister to others.
Okay.
But certainly, I guess, minister with a capital M. But, yeah, I'm a minister. I'm a reverend. I'm a pastor. I'm a priest. And the type of priest that I am is a vicar.
Okay.
So I serve vicariously for my bishop in this small congregation.
Vicar, vicarious. I love it.
Makes sense, huh?
Yeah, it does. I love
Yeah,
the
but
language.
that didn't, I didn't get that. That didn't happen until the year like 2002 or something that I felt that the call to ordain ministry.
Right.
But, my wife and I, when we graduated college, we got married. I proposed to her the day she graduated from college. And then we got married that summer in 1988.
Don't let that grass grow under your feet,
It's kind of fun because the Reverend Dr. Gordy Myra, Lutheran pastor, because my wife is Lutheran, was the one that officiated our wedding up here at Trinity Lutheran. And I always think it's funny to say it's behind Dollar General because obviously the Lutheran Church was there way before Dollar General was. So,
And to use Dollar General as a landmark, I don't know what to say about that.
It kind of knocks me out.
I know, it kind of knocks me out.
But that's where we got married.
Dollar General?
Well, up the hill from Dollar General.
Be careful what you
just an
say.
empty field
Dollar
then.
General.
That was an empty field then, of course. But we got married and then we moved to Portland after I graduated because I still had a year of college to go. And we lived in Portland. We had Portland jobs for a little bit. And then when we were thinking we were going to have babies, it made sense to come home so that because both of our parents live here. And so it made sense to have grandparents nearby.
Yep.
So that's why my daughters were born in the new hospital.
Nice.
Yeah, at Sutter Coast.
I love that.
Yeah.
And Robert or Bob, whichever one, right?
Sure.
Or Silky. We could call you Silky.
All three.
So you were also a minister.
Yes, I was. And I studied for the ministry early on in life, but kept going off in other directions, not sure I want to do this. And I wound up in a whole series of events where I took time off or did what was called a vicarage in that particular tradition, but it was a ministerial internship. But that all took a while, and I didn't actually get ordained as a pastor and have a call until I must have been in my late 50s or so. I did lots of things in politics and media, and for about 15, 20 years, then decided that I would take a try at teaching. And shortly after that, my old teenage church, as I like to call it, had been declining in its membership and wondered if I would become a part-time pastor for them. And I jumped through some hoops in that particular denomination and served in that capacity for something like 23 years.
Wow.
I was a high school teacher all at the same time.
Oh, my goodness.
So are you saying, Robert, that you served the congregation that you had been a member of when you were a teenager?
Yes.
Well, we share that in common.
Isn't that funny?
We share quite a bit strangely in common, I think.
I know, it is
And
interesting.
interestingly enough, Bernie, you've continued to be a commercial fisherman.
Yeah, so when we moved back to town in 1990, I bought a boat for my grandfather and I started crab fishing, and then I did that continuously since then. I had to miss a season when I did my my first 3 years of seminary were done in Eugene, and so I commuted for that. But my last year of seminary I had to do in the Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria,
That would be
Virginia.
a rough commute.
Yeah, I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
See, that was the thing is I could have went to seminary down in Berkeley, and I would have kind of commuted. I would have came home every once in a while, but I wanted my family to come with me to seminary. So that year, I missed that crab season, in person, although I was on the phone a lot.
Right. And so what I find interesting is you were you are still a commercial fisherman, and you were teaching at the same time. So it was like you both were doing...
Bivocational is a fancy term for
right?
it. Work for priests and non-fancy.
I know.
Term.
It's
and
kind of amazing.
There's a long tradition of that within Christianity.
For sure.
Yeah. And I've met your lovely wife, who is now departed, but she was a joy. And listening to her play the piano, Bob, was one of the great joys of my life. She was amazing.
She also was bivocational.
Wow.
She was a lawyer, and she got there by unusual means, what's called law office study. She didn't finish law school, but she worked with a attorney to become eligible, and later became a real leader in law. She became the head of the state of California's Board of Legal Specialization, and also served on American Bar Association committees a group called the National Baton Twirlers Association. No, I got it wrong. They have the same initials as the National Baton Twirlers Association.
Okay.
It's the National Board of Trial Advocacy.
Okay.
And
I'm thinking, really? The batons? Okay.
and a curious thing about that is many of those people were moneyed lawyers who were trial lawyers, and that often happens by accident. There was a plane crash where they had a relative was on it, or ambulance chaser got someplace quickly, and they're not necessarily attuned to consumer issues about the law. While Alice came from a workers' comp background, and she was dealing with injured workers all the time, and kind of let those people understand that a lot of folk are not just people who had serious injuries that made you rich, but a lot of folk are hurting, and lawyers should be thinking about consumer protection and things like that. And she was involved in educating them on that way, and also on other issues. The most remarkable probably was she said they met like 2 or 3 times a year, usually in big cities across the land. And Alice always got them to be involved in doing something locally to, in some way or another, thank them for allowing them to be there, in essence.
Nice.
And in New Orleans, she hooked up with a group called Friends of Women or something like that, and wound up having these hotshot lawyers putting together kits for sex workers, for drug addicts, and with things like clean needles and condoms and what your legal rights are, and had these attorneys actually consulting and meeting some of those people to understand more about their legal rights.
Wow.
So she was pretty remarkable in things she accomplished.
Very avant-garde, right? Right
sure.
on the leading edge there. Yeah, that's pretty remarkable. So if we talk a little bit about St. Timothy's here, St. Timothy's has been around for a long time.
Yeah, well, the congregation was founded in 1946, and then the land where we are now was acquired in 1952, and the building was completed maybe 53 or 54.
And all of that is well before the city of Brookings was incorporated.
Well,
as
I think the city was incorporated around the same time.
Okay.
But, they didn't have a municipal code yet.
Ah, okay.
And then as the municipal code was developed, we were certainly grandfathered in on the zoning. Yeah.
Right. Although it's normal to have a church in a residential area.
I think I heard that of the 15 churches in the city of Brookings, in the city limits, that of the 15 churches, 14 of them are in residential zoning.
Yeah. I mean,
That's true
I think
throughout the land.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember back in my youth, and it was all residential.
I think it's deliberate. I think there's the American people in general, they appreciate what a church offers as far as like social safety net type stuff. You ever thought about why is it that churches are tax exempt? And it's because they bring value to the community, and that's kind of like a way to help compensate them for this societal expectation that churches are going to look after the people who are falling on hard times.
Absolutely.
So the alms that churches provide are highly valued typically by the communities and not just the United States, but throughout the world and throughout history.
Often they take forms of things that social service agencies might not readily be able to do. There's a lot of flexibility and sensibility that I've seen shown remarkably at St. Tim's.
Well, you know, something that it kind of makes me think of. So a lot of hospitals are nonprofit hospitals, and in exchange for their nonprofit status, they're expected to give a certain amount of pro bono work.
It's law, actually. The laws are not always followed.
I suspect your wife would have known that. Huh? So the idea that, and sometimes I use the word like indigent care, and I don't like the word indigent, but somebody comes in and they can't pay, and they write it off. And in exchange for the fact that they write off a certain amount of their services they provide, they're given, nonprofit status. Well, it's similar with churches in the sense that there is a social obligation of a church that part of the social contract that churches provide into the community for people beyond their membership.
Yes.
Obviously beyond. I mean, if it's just for their membership, then what's the point? So we're talking about various different forms of alms. Alms come in many, many different forms. Yeah.
I remember that we had coat drives because where I lived in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, it was cold. So, you had to have, your kids had to have coats, So there were coat drives and there were spaghetti dinners and, there was a fair that the church sponsored every year. And it wasn't just the parishioners who were allowed to come there. I mean, everybody was
of course.
And part of the ministry of virtually every church is some sort of counseling, some sort of being there to receive confessions or just talk through stuff.
Right.
And there also, any good pastor would know valuable referrals. And at St. Tim's, they have kind of perfected some of those referrals.
Right. Well, the deal is that, I'm losing track of my days a little bit. I think today, as we record this, it's Saturday.
I think today's Saturday.
But tomorrow morning is Sunday.
Oh, that'll be important to know.
There we go.
But you know what, though? Deacon Linda's going to preach for me, so I'll be okay on that. But because I haven't written a sermon, so that's good that she's going to for tomorrow. But just yesterday, a woman came in who was grieving. She had lost her husband to an unexpected death. And not only did she need to be, to be provided pastoral care through the form of our lay chaplain, who is going through clinical chaplain training right now, but also she needed to have some counsel about how it is that she would go about obtaining her husband's remains.
Yes.
And how does she go about obtaining a death certificate? And we know we have answers to these questions.
Right.
And
those are very important questions.
Yeah.
This woman was in a crisis.
Yeah.
And when we respond to somebody who's in crisis, that's right part and parcel with our faith. And you know what the thing about it, though, is that we think about crises like, something sudden happens like, her husband dying. But some people are in these prolonged crises. They've been in a crisis for months or perhaps even years, and they haven't been able to get their feet out from, get their feet under them. They haven't been able to, some catastrophic thing happened and they didn't find the good pastoral care that they needed maybe initially. And so they're still disoriented. And so to think that a crisis is just this acute thing, it's not necessarily. There's different kinds of crises.
Well, and I think that all of us, we've been through COVID now. Hopefully we're, kind of on the tail end of COVID, but that was a crisis that just kept going. I spent 3 years basically locked down in my house, and it was rough.
I lost my wife in April of 2020, and
COVID
I'm older,
hit. Yeah.
and I was extremely isolated for quite a long time.
Absolutely.
And And one thing that was real obvious to me is the town had pretty much shut down. Mm-hmm. But St. Tim's was a place where I and a lot of others got our COVID shots.
Yep.
If they needed a COVID test, it could be gotten there. And it was just a place where a lot of people had very, very basic needs. And needs that out and housed people
Yes.
probably don't even think about.
Yep. That's right.
Needing showers, needing a place to charge your cell phone,
Right.
Needing clean clothing. And St. Tim's has been remarkably sensitive to those kind of needs and at working out ways of doing it. They have a voucher program worked out with a laundromat that they can come certain times for 3 hours, whatever it is. And often a member, including pastoral staff of St. Tim's, will be down at the laundromat meeting people and letting them know that this is a congregation that really cares.
Well, and the thing is that if you actually envision yourself as a Christian, that means something. That right? That means that you are following Jesus Christ. That's what that means. And if you look at the teachings and what Jesus Christ did, I don't know how you can come to any other conclusion than that is your duty as a Christian.
That's true enough, Candice. But the thing is even if we were a church that worshipped the, flying spaghetti monster or whatever, we would still be a church.
Yes.
So even if we weren't followers of Jesus Christ, which of course we are, but even if we had some other faith that we followed, we still would need. We still have the right in the United States of America to practice whatever the faith is that we have.
You have the protection of the Constitution.
Well, it turns out, something I found out not very long ago, Candice, is that there was a church in Florida that was practicing animal sacrifice. And I don't know what kind of church it was. It was some, hybrid of some kind. And their community decided they shouldn't be sacrificing animals in their church. And so they tried to stop them from doing that. But you know what? That's protected under the religious freedoms. And so that church continues to do that.
And you don't have to agree with.
And by the way, we're not sacrificing animals.
No.
But I'm just saying that
exactly
that in the United States of America, religious freedom takes the form of many different practices.
Right.
And it's, to me, feeding people, connecting them to laundry vouchers, making sure they have clean clothes and a place to get a cup of coffee or charge their phone, like Pastor Robert said.
Right.
All that stuff seems relatively tame to me. But, what the problem is that people have to get to the church and they walk through these residential neighborhoods and, they don't levitate in, they walk. No. And so people see them. And in our society, when you see someone who's unhoused, certainly when you see somebody who's mentally ill and they're in the middle of some sort of a manic phase or some sort of a psychotic break, in our society, we respond, with fear.
Yes.
And
exactly.
When people are scared, they're gonna try to eliminate whatever they perceive the threat to be. And so, unfortunately, some of the people that we serve have been perceived as threatening.
Interestingly, I've been communicating kind of nationwide through progressivechristianity.org and other places about the issues raised here. And I just got an email from someplace in a Minnesota suburb, so I assume of the Twin Cities, and said a Lutheran church there is facing similar problems. I don't know all the details. And it happens to be next to a large park. And there's no way that St. Tim's can be responsible for what goes on in their park. And the police just better police it better if there are issues that continue.
And it's remarkable, isn't it? I mean, it seems like, again, a no-brainer. It's not that the people who are coming for the lunch service are then camping in the church lobby and staying there overnight. And I mean, that's not what's going on.
Well, part of the problem, though, is that when we hosted the cars in the parking lot during the beginning of the pandemic.
And that was the city's idea, wasn't it?
It was. My friend Jake was the mayor at the time, and the idea was that if every church in town hosted 3 cars, then we would have places for people to be during a pandemic. And don't forget, that was highly infectious. A lot of people in our own community died from that, and nationwide, over 1 million people did. So, I think in hindsight, we think, well, glad that's over. But it was really catastrophic.
If St. Tim's did not do what it did during COVID, there probably would be 1,000 more deaths.
I agree.
And Brookings Core developed out of St. Tim's, and
we had no public health official. There was nothing
the
happening.
state cut it down.
They did. But in response to the need, because initially, and I don't know how much I've talked about this publicly, but initially the reason why I wanted to be a COVID vaccination site was because I knew that poor and unhoused people were going to have a hard time getting the COVID vaccine.
Yes.
And so my target demographic was just going to be who might be at a soup kitchen. And
but the reality was that none of us could get them.
And so guess what we did? We stepped it up and started, we couldn't discriminate against housed folks. So we had to...
Even if we were clean.
Let them see what it feels like.
Even if we had a shower that morning.
So we had to make the resources we had at our disposal available to everyone. And I was really proud of the way we responded. We ended up doing something like 4,500 shots, I think, over the course of our shot clinic. It might have, and then I think we did 6,500 or 7,000 COVID tests. Wow. And then, and one thing too, I want to make sure that I make clear is that we did get a bunch of money from the Oregon Health Authority. We got $410,000. The purpose of that was to disperse it to the people who are quarantining so that they wouldn't have to feel compelled to go to work.
Yes.
So the whole idea is that you get COVID, you're going to need to stay home for 2 weeks. But who can afford to miss 2 weeks of work? In the United States of America, the vast majority of people who work are living paycheck to paycheck.
Yep.
So if they miss 2 weeks of work, they could miss their rent. They could end up becoming unhoused. Our whole mission when it comes to our ministries is to create stability in people's lives and to, if they're already housed, to keep them housed. Right. And if they're unhoused, to get them housed. I mean, that's our job as far as sort of like our niche, I guess.
Right.
Different churches do different ministries, but that's kind of right there in the niche, in the core of what it is that we do. And so that was a natural fit for us to have people who tested positive for COVID, to ask them if they were going to be able to pay their rent, to be able to pay their utilities, and were they going to be able to have access to food? Because we don't need them roaming around in the grocery store while they're positive for COVID. So we had that. So they called it wraparound care. And so we had a number of people that were part of our team that would make contact with the person that had tested positive, would kind of evaluate what their needs were. And then we had a whole process of making sure that they had their financial needs met. And
so
that's
the
where
$400,000 didn't exactly line your pocket.
It didn't. I didn't take any of it. I did not. My salary that the church pays me, which is $1,820 a month, I think I get paid because I got a raise a while ago, a couple of years ago. I got a raise. I think I get $1,820 a month, and it did not change as a result of all this. And that comes from the church. That doesn't come from anywhere else. That comes out of our operating budget from the people who tithe, the parishioners. It comes out of their pledges. And
if that money came from OHA, they are very, very particular that it gets spent on the thing that it's supposed to.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, the monitoring was rigorous.
Of course.
And we did have to. OHA told us that this went beyond what a volunteer should be expected to do and asked us to compensate our paid staff. Good. And the paid staff was not just members of the church. It was a whole, we have many people that we interact with. It's not just, people who, just because somebody, if somebody doesn't come and worship on a Sunday morning with us, that doesn't change the fact that they're part of who we are. And because that's kind of nebulous. How do you define who's a member of your church when people participate in the ministries of the church in so many different ways, not just Sunday morning? I mean, Sunday morning worship is not the defining factor, I think, in who's a member. So
I'd like to talk a little more about the impact of the time when COVID was so strong here. While St. Tim's stepped up in its services and responded remarkably, most of the other churches in town, including those who had regular feeding programs, shut down at least in terms of feeding programs and other ways of reaching out.
To interrupt, the Presbyterian Church was the exception to that. They never missed a meal.
Okay.
And then the other churches, they were trying to figure out, like the Trinity Lutheran and the Star of the Sea, they were trying to figure out what are we going to do? How are we going to what's our best practices going to be? They were trying to figure out how is it that we can make this, keep everybody safe?
Right.
And they came back online relatively quickly. And now, as far as I can tell, the Trinity Lutheran Friday meal is the most popular meal of all of the meals.
Oh, do they serve really good stuff?
Well, they have. They have some exceptionally good cooks.
There we go.
More accessible location.
Well, you know what it is. They got. I don't know what it is. They have a really upbeat atmosphere. They got some really high quality volunteers in their kitchen, and they just do an outstanding job.
But I think that Bob, your point is excellent. There was a void when COVID hit, and we all kind of went, "Oh my God, what are we doing?"
What do we do?
There was a void. There was a void in services. Nobody was stepping up except St. Tim's. And that's just the reality. So, if we're sitting around going, oh, well, they overstepped. No, they stepped into the void. Nobody was stepping up.
There had been churches feeding people 7 days a week, and St.
no
Tim's
longer.
wound up having to do virtually that all by
know.
itself.
There was no COVID testing happening anywhere. Trying to get a COVID test was ridiculous.
Yeah,
Trying to get a shot was ridiculous.
People were coming up from Smith River. People were coming down from Gold Beach.
I know.
There were people from far and wide that were coming to get tested, and we're very grateful for the fact that we were, because we were open 6 days a week during that time doing the COVID testing.
Yep. And I distinctly...
We took Sundays off from that.
I distinctly remember that the nurse walked to my car because my husband's disabled.
Yes.
And gave Phil the shot. So
we went into the skilled nursing facility on several occasions to vaccinate both the staff and the residents.
Yep.
We went to the other assisted living places in town to do the same thing. We did house calls. There were numerous different times when we went to somebody's home to vaccinate them. And in fact, traveled all the way to Gold Beach to do that. And one time even down to Crescent City to vaccinate somebody who is, which, it's Oregon vaccine that was being paid for by, the Oregon Health Authority, but we smuggle it across the state line.
if you're talking about somebody's life.
I think maybe the statute of limitations is up, but we actually,
probably.
We snuck across the state border to vaccinate a
that vaccine.
I would like to talk a little about what happened next in terms of the law. And some 29 or 30 people signed a petition that described, alleged a lot of things about crime in the neighborhood, but talked about hostile vagrants and undesirables.
Right.
And that got to the city council and the mayor, and their response to it was to come up with a scheme to limit feedings at churches to 2 times a week for a certain number of hours, and to somehow assume that the city had the ability to start affecting the practice of religion in that way. And most of the other churches went along with this, but St. Tim's, I'm proud, with their backing by the diocese, realized there was a huge First Amendment issue, which is now unfortunately bringing light to Brookings that's not exactly positive, just like the city manager stuff does.
Yep.
And what the law says, the U.S. Constitution, is right up with free speech and freedom of the press and right to assembly and the redress of grievances, is no establishment of religion and a guarantee of the free exercise thereof. In the Oregon Constitution, it's even more clear. It says basically that no government shall in any way whatever interfere with people performing their religious functions.
Right.
And beyond that, there's federal law that was passed unanimously by both houses of Congress back in the year 2000. The background of that is for years there was lots of controversies just of this sort. People didn't like what was going on in a church. Sometimes it was controversies about eminent domain. I personally knew of this because for a while I went to a Lutheran church and parochial school in Los Angeles, and a couple of years later the whole thing was destroyed because the freeway system needed that property.
Yeah.
And congressmen got tired of all these complaints they were hearing about churches doing this and that, and so they passed unanimously by both houses a bill that clearly says that you must have a compelling state interest that cannot be fulfilled by other means before you can at all mess around with the freedom of the practice of religion. And I'm afraid the city council either didn't do its homework or thinks that laws that apply to every other city in the country somehow don't apply to them. And it's creating an enormous storm of billable hours. And the ones that are most benefiting from this are lawyers. Everybody else is kind of just caught in the maelstrom.
Yeah.
That part's unfortunate, isn't it?
It is.
But you know what I'll kind of add to the petition is, so we were the only church that did have the 3 cars in the parking lot at the time. Mm-hmm. So we're talking about April of 2021, I guess. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, our mental health ADAPT hadn't been put into place yet, for mental health services. So they didn't have any kind of response with, say, their peer support people that they have now or their crisis response team. And so it's probably either Freedom Health or maybe Curry Health, what was it called? Curry Health?
Curry Community Health, I think.
Whatever our mental health was before ADAPT. They weren't able to come out and respond because of the whole COVID thing, and neither was the Oregon Department of Human Services. We couldn't have Adult Protective Services couldn't come out and respond, so they were all stuck in their various different offices because of the rules that have been put in place. Right. So our people in the cars, they started their mental health devolved. Because there they are, in a car all day and couldn't really wander around. And you should
try living in a car and see how that feels, right? Your mental health is going to devolve.
I was kind of, in hindsight, it's surprising it didn't happen sooner. Yeah. But, there was a couple of the people were on edge with they had access to no resources at all beyond what the church could provide. Right. What they needed was access to mental health, like I say. Yep. And so they started to attack each other. Mm-hmm. And the people, that live in the neighborhood, they didn't want to see that. Mm-hmm. And it's a threatening kind of a thing to watch people attack each other. So that's what I think
got the wheels going.
Yeah, and so what I thought was going to happen there is that, okay, so we'll close down the car camping because by the time the end of June of 2021 had happened, things were changing for the better. And so we closed up the car camping thing and made it so that no one was allowed to sleep on the church grounds at all. And I thought that would resolve the issue. And it surprised me when the city council decided that they were going to limit our feeding somehow, because those two things were completely unrelated. But my intention all along was that, okay, there's, the neighborhood's alarmed. Let's get together and have like a summit. Let's get everybody around a big table, like in the EOC,
yeah,
Emergency
Operations Center.
Yeah, because they got
there's
an opportunity
table
for a big table there.
Big table.
And my hope is that some city official would facilitate a discussion between the people who live in the neighborhood and the church and other concerned citizens. Maybe, KCIW could have been there to record it all for the people who weren't able to attend. And we would come up with solutions and reassurances and
actually define the problem.
Yeah.
Because the problem was not that there were people being fed lunch. That was not the problem.
Right.
Ever.
No, the problem was, these people that, and by the way, the people who were having those physical confrontations with each other, they both did end up in the state hospital, in the state mental hospital. Eventually, it took forever,
of course,
but eventually they ended up.
Right.
So this isn't,
which is where they should have been. Yeah.
So when I say that it was a mental health crisis, it really was. They both,
yes.
and I know it seems like, yeah, sure, I'm just saying that. How could that be true? But I promise you, it's a fact that they both ended up in the state hospital.
Yeah.
And
you weren't the one who chose who would be parking at the church.
Well, I did. Well, we did.
Okay.
But the thing is that the reason why we picked those particular people is because they were highly vulnerable. That was like our criteria: is who's the most vulnerable and who's going to benefit the most from stability. Right. And our thought was somebody who is potentially. I mean, everybody's kind of unstable. I mean, I am.
I am.
Well, there you go. I mean,
but there are degrees.
But there's degrees and circumstances that bring it out even worse.
Yeah.
And certainly I didn't anticipate that part of it. And there's no doubt that we would not do that again under those circumstances, because we have to have case management. We have to have access to mental health professionals. We have to have access to, primary care providers. We have to have access to the services that are provided by the Oregon Department of Human Services. So, we
were in the middle of a pandemic, Bernie.
Yeah.
We were making it up as we went along because we'd never been there before.
And our intentions were good.
Of course they were.
The problem is that the whole thing was a lot bigger than we could handle.
Yes.
And I readily admit that. And, we stopped it and we're not going to do it again.
And CORE developed and took some of the burden away.
They did. And we have hopes that at some point there will be a shelter in town that will be able to have a place for people to be where they will have all those things that I mentioned in place.
And you pray for it every Sunday.
Yep.
We do.
Well, I
we
think
very
it's a
much do. And I almost have it committed to memory.
Let's hear it.
I can't.
Okay.
I know I'll mess it up. If Deacon Linda were here, she could. But what the fact is that we're kind of going the long way around the fence here. Unfortunately, what I would have liked to have done 2.5 years ago, I still want to do that. I still want to have, a community summit, whatever you want to call that hopefully will be facilitated by some city official. So once all the lawsuit and legal stuff is resolved, I still want to have that sit-down meeting. I'm afraid that some people have really just thrown up their hands and they're not going to be willing to come to the table now because we're so late into the, everything, all this stuff that's gone on, all the animosity that's developed. But it's certainly my hope that we'll be able to work collaboratively as a community to kind of get a handle on how do we address these this homeless crisis that isn't going away.
Right.
It's
getting worse. It's getting worse.
In my observation, it's getting worse, and I don't see how it's not. I don't see
the economics are such a factor.
I know.
And the lack of housing.
Yeah. Yes.
So
yes,
the way that you solve homelessness is you put people in homes, right?
Right.
But where are those homes going to come from unless we figure out as a community how to acquire things like shelters and transitional homes and group housing and public housing and more subsidized. I mean, there's lots and lots of things that we can add into the equation if we can just agree. But one of the things that we have to come to terms with is we have to stop blaming the victim. We have to stop saying, well, if that person would just get a job, they would be able to solve their problem themselves.
Right.
Well, that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about people with traumatic brain injuries. We're talking about people with pretty robust mental health issues, whether it's schizophrenia or obsessive compulsive disorder that prevents them from being able to work, whether it's schizophrenia. I never in my wildest imagination thought that I would find so much untreated psychosis in our community.
Yeah.
It is real and it is rampant, and these are homegrown folks. We're not bringing them in from San Francisco. These are people who went through, and part of the reason why I think, maybe 20 years ago, I don't remember when, we led the state for domestic abuse in our county. Oh. We were the number one county for domestic abuse.
Wow.
And that was about the time that like the Oasis shelter was getting rolled out in response to that need. But we had a tremendous number of kids who were growing up in these really dysfunctional households. Yep. And if you're predisposed to mental illness, a trauma like being beaten every day by, by a parent, or by being, the alcoholism that we have in our community is rampant as well. Yeah. It's not just, methamphetamine and fentanyl. Yeah, alcoholism's always been a constant within our community.
And you can understand it. It's a buffer. People use it to buffer the pain.
And the pain comes from the breakdown of the family unit, which largely happens because of lack of economic opportunity. You're not doing well. You're frustrated, and next thing you know, you're kicking the dog. And when the dog's not available to kick, you're kicking something else.
Kick one of the kids.
You're kicking one of the kids, or you're kicking the spouse.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
And then we have a large number of single parent homes, and there's a big gap in our community between the retirees who are relatively well off and the working class that are in service sector jobs.
That are barely keeping it together.
And now, over the course of the last 3 or 4 or 5 years, the rental rates have gone through the roof.
Yes.
It's just exploded. They've doubled and tripled. So I see homes now for $2,500 a month for a 4-bedroom, $2,000 a month for a 3-bedroom, like $2,000 to $2,500 for a 3-bedroom. I see studio apartments for $1,350.
Oh, I know.
It's how in the world are we going to be able to expect the people who are working in those service sector jobs, whether it's working at the nursing home or working in a restaurant or even somebody who's changing the tires at Les Schwab, how do we expect them to be able to live in our community? So
where can they live nearby?
Well,
there isn't anywhere.
Pistol River, I don't think so.
Not really.
So generally, people would live perhaps in a mobile home park. Well, the problem is the majority of our mobile home parks are 55 and older parks.
Yes.
And if you take a park that is like a family type park, well, now the space rents are going up.
Yep.
They're much higher than they used to be. But not only that, they don't have any vacancies.
No.
And so the next thing is you live in a trailer, travel trailer, or some sort of RV, and those spaces are all taken as well. Plus, they're going at like $600 a month now in a lot of places.
So you end up trying to live in a car, and then they pass an ordinance. The city council passes an ordinance that says you're not allowed to live in your car.
Well, it makes it an insurmountable obstacle to employment when you can't take care of your own basic needs.
Yeah.
And then you're supposed to go to work. And there are people who do it.
Yeah.
And we encourage them, support them, and try to figure out ways for them to be more effective in their jobs.
I'd like to talk a little more about the city's response. It apparently, I don't know exactly what happened, but apparently after St. Tim's did not participate in getting its kitchen approved with certain hours and twice a week, while the other churches did, the city says, well, how are we going to get back at St. Tim's for disobeying us? Of course, they didn't have the legal right to do it, but that's a whole different question. And it became a two-pronged attack. One thing is about food, but the other thing is much bigger, and it has to do with the entire ministry of every church in town. If a city planning committee can use an abatement procedure, which is usually used to deal with physical eyesores like rusty trailers and old tires on some lot, or people who've done things without having a permit for them. They're using an abatement procedure that is totally inappropriate for a church, threatening $720 a day fine until somebody apparently thinks it's acceptable what their ministries are. And then to justify this, they went to 2 dictionaries and looked at one definition each. Now, when I taught high school, I often said there's certain things you should have learned in middle school or junior high. And one of the first rules with a dictionary is look at all the definitions.
Yes, not just the
first one. It depends on the dictionary as to what the first one is.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the first use of the word in English history. Mm-hmm. Other times it's what some dictionary editor thinks is the most common use.
Right.
But there are some words that have very, very different definitions. And my favorite is the word, to illustrate this, is the word cleave. It has 2 extremely opposite definitions. It can be clinging to a bride and becoming one flesh and all that, or it can be what a butcher does with a meat cleaver.
Yes.
And anyway, to look in a dictionary and say, oh, we found it. It says a church is a building usually for Christian worship. That settles it.
Pastor Robert, I think in a kind of like a practical sense, we're supposed to, the request was for, well, I don't know about request, but we were told that we could no longer do our day shelter and our advocacy program. And the day shelter, what that looks like is people come in who are wet and cold perhaps, and they have a chance to dry out while they wait to use the shower and charge their phone while they do it and get a cup of coffee. And the thing that sort of bothers me about that is that what if an indisputable, like a parishioner that is by everybody's definition a parishioner, somebody who worships every Sunday morning. What if it were you? Mm-hmm. What if it was you, Pastor Robert, one of my parishioners that I value highly? What if you came in and you wanted to get a cup of coffee because this is all happening during the office hours, during our regular office hours that we've had for decades. So what if you wanted to come in and have a cup of coffee? Does that meet the criteria of the day shelter program? And what if at the same time you have your water has been shut off because of some unforeseen reason and you need to use the shower? And because your water's shut off, you need to get a laundry voucher. And what if there was some catastrophe that your home was actually, God forbid, lit fire and you had to, who knows what? I mean, I don't know. But my point is that can I provide it to you, Pastor Robert, but not to someone else? Can I provide that alm, that service, that hospitality to you? And I have to discern who I can provide it to and who I can't?
The clearest
it's ridiculous
thing in the Bible about a Christian's life in response to people in need is in Matthew 25. And that specifically, it's sometimes called the parable of the Last Judgment, says that when one responds with compassion and love to people who are naked, to those who are hungry, to those who are strangers, to those who are unhoused, you are expressing your worship of Jesus. And that's so clear.
Yep.
And it's not for the state or the federal government, and certainly not for a scofflaw city council in Brookings to say, oh, that doesn't apply to us, or those of us who are Christian. That somehow we can, because we have someone who looked up a dictionary and saw one definition of church, we can define what ministry should go on a property. That is outrageous.
I was talking about the day shelter. Now, the other part of it, that we're supposed to stop is the advocacy thing. What our advocacy, for me, what the word advocacy means is that if I'm advocating for you, I am taking on whatever it is that you're up against as if it were my own. Mm-hmm. So when I advocate for you, I am shoulder to shoulder with you, taking on that burden as if it were my own. when somebody comes in for alms, they maybe they need their rent paid, or maybe they need their utilities paid. That's been the more traditional kind of a thing that we do when we're doing our alms. We still continue to do that now. We've done that ever since the church was founded. We've always had an alms fund. And so when the person comes in, we have to get to know the person first. I spend at least 20 minutes with a person before I write any check or offer any kind of financial assistance. And that's the way it has always been. We try to establish a relationship to figure out what exactly is this person's need, because maybe it's something different or more, or maybe maybe we need to think about how do we prevent this from happening in the future. And so I take on what their issue is if it were my own, even if it has to, because sometimes I actually do need to go, usually I do it through writing a check and then have them take it down to, say, Coos Curry Electric, but sometimes I go my own self. And so we've always had this alms program that was distributed by me, and the demand became so great that I couldn't do it by myself. Remember, I'm bivocational, part-time, getting $1,820, and back then I wasn't even getting that much each month. And so I needed more people to help me with that. And so we ended up recruiting some people, and then the one gal unfortunately passed away, and another gal she went on a world cruise, and then another gal. Anyway, eventually we have the team that we have now. And so the definition of what they do is they advocate for people and they assist me in the almsgiving, because I can't do it all by myself.
No, of course not.
And also,
I hate to tell you this, guys. I'm looking at that clock, and that clock is telling us that we're just about out of time.
I have a short...
Very quick. You have 2 seconds.
Part of the type of help they give often is basic stuff about how to get birth certificates, how to get IDs, how to get criminal charges expunged if they can be. And those are really important to many people who are in that situation.
I know. Well, we are, as I say, we're just about out of time, so we have to start wrapping this up. But the lawsuit has now finished all of its depositions. I think you're now waiting for summary judgment. Is that?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. So hopefully that will happen sometime in the next century, and we hope.
I don't know what the time frame is.
I mean, seriously,
You're asking for a jury trial too?
No,
well, we will if the motion for summary judgment is denied. Then we originally did ask for a jury trial.
Right.
Okay.
So we're just going to have to kind of wait and see how things work out. I think that certainly things are moving from what I can see. Things are moving in the right direction. So we'll just keep. And I will have both of you back again, as soon as we've got some new information. I want to thank you both for, making the time to keep us updated, because this is important stuff. This is stuff we need to know. So, and thank you for your advocacy and your love. So,
this
really.
Is an issue of extreme nationwide importance.
Yes, I know.
And the city just cannot have the attitude of, well, we don't like this law, we'll just scoff at it.
I know.
And the only answer to that is send the scofflaws out. There's a recall coming up.
Absolutely.
I take no position on that, by the way.
Yeah, I know, not
just
technically.
So you know. I really don't.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, you're allowed. I wear a
I don't
button.
I don't live in the city limits, and
right.
I also am not a political person.
Yeah. Okay. I also want to thank our audience for tuning in. KCIW is your community radio station, run entirely by volunteers and funded by donations and grants. Join us. Go to our website, kciw.org, to volunteer or donate. We'd love to have you as part of our family. I'm Candice Michel, and this is our community.